Commander Daeho Kim stood at the observation deck of Confluence Station, watching the massive Velinary warship approach through the viewport. The alien vessel was 3 times larger than any human ship. Its dark metal hull covered in sharp angles that made it look like a predator ready to strike. Red lights pulsed along its sides like a heartbeat, and weapon ports gleamed in the starlight. "They're early," Captain Hyjin Park said as she joined him at the window. Her security uniform was crisp and clean, but Daeho could see the tension in her shoulders. The diplomatic schedule said they wouldn't arrive for another 6 hours. Daeho nodded slowly, his dark eyes studying every detail of the approaching ship. Early arrival is a power move. They want us to feel unprepared and rushed. He turned away from the viewport and walked toward the command center. "How many ships did they bring?" "Just the one flagship. But our sensors show it carries enough firepower to destroy this entire station and half the human fleet." Hyjin followed beside him, her boots clicking on the metal floor. "The crew size readings are off the charts. 2. They brought an army, not a diplomatic team." The corridors of Confluence Station buzzed with activity. Human technicians ran final checks on communication systems, while security teams took their positions. Everyone knew this meeting could decide the future of humanity. The Velinary Empire had been pushing against human territory for months, and their ships were faster and stronger than anything Earth could build. Daeho entered the main briefing room where Ambassador Young-Soo Lee was pacing back and forth. The older diplomat's face was pale with worry, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air. "Commander Kim, thank goodness you're here," Young-Soo said, rushing over. "I just received word that Sovereign Vexthera herself is aboard that ship, the supreme ruler of the Velinary Empire. This changes everything." "Does it?" Daeho asked calmly, taking a seat at the head of the conference table. "Or does it give us exactly what we need?" Young-Soo stared at him in confusion. "What we need?" "Commander, if the Sovereign is here personally, it means they're either planning to deliver an ultimatum or they're preparing for war. Neither option is good for us." Daeho opened his datapad and began scrolling through files. "Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know about Velinary culture? They're warriors. Honor-based society. They respect strength and despise weakness." Young-Soo sat down across from him. "That's why these negotiations are so dangerous. They see our smaller fleet and assume we're easy prey." "Exactly." Daeho smiled slightly. "And what happens when a warrior culture thinks they're facing weak opponents?" Before Young-Soo could answer, the station's communication system crackled to life. A deep alien voice filled the room, speaking in heavily accented but clear English. "Human station, this is Sovereign Vexthera of the Velinary Empire. We demand immediate docking privileges and an audience with your highest-ranking officials. You have 10 minutes to comply." Hyjin activated her comm unit. "This is Captain Park, head of station security. We welcome the Sovereign and her delegation. Docking Bay 7 is prepared for your arrival. Security measures will be minimal," the alien voice replied coldly. "We will not tolerate any show of aggressive intent." After the communication ended, Young-Soo turned to Daeho with worried eyes. "They're dictating terms before they even dock. This is not starting well." Daeho stood up and straightened his uniform jacket. "Actually, it's starting perfectly." He walked to a wall display and activated a schematic of the station. "Captain Park, I need you to make sure our security teams are visible but not threatening. Standard diplomatic protocol, nothing more." "Sir, are you sure that they're planning something hostile? We should be ready." "They won't attack us here," Daeho said with confidence. "Not yet. The Sovereign came personally because she wants to see our reactions firsthand. She's studying us just like we need to study her." "Dr. Myung." Choi entered the briefing room, carrying a stack of research files. The xenopsychologist looked tired but determined. "Commander, I've compiled everything we know about Velinary leadership behavior. The fact that their Sovereign came personally is actually unusual. Normally, they send subordinates to handle what they consider lesser species, meaning..." Young-Soo asked, "Meaning she's either very confident in her position, or she's more concerned about humanity than their public statements suggest." Myung sat down and opened her files. I've identified several behavioral patterns that might help in negotiations. Daeho nodded approvingly. Good work, Doctor. Keep analyzing their behavior once they're aboard. I need to understand exactly how their leader thinks. The station shuddered slightly as the massive Velinary ship docked. Through the walls, they could hear the heavy footsteps of alien boots on metal floors. The sound sent chills down the spines of everyone in the room. Remember, Daeho said quietly, everything we do from this moment forward will be watched and judged. They expect us to be intimidated. They expect us to make mistakes. Let's not disappoint them. Young-soo frowned. What do you mean, not disappoint? Them. Before Daeho could answer, the briefing room doors opened. A group of Velinary warriors entered, their tall forms covered in elaborate armor that gleamed under the station lights. They were impressive creatures, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and confident bearing. Their faces were hidden behind ceremonial masks, but their body language spoke of barely contained aggression. Behind them walked Sovereign Vexthera herself. Unlike her guards, her face was uncovered, revealing sharp features and piercing yellow eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her armor was more elaborate than the others, decorated with symbols of rank and achievement. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step calculated and purposeful. I am Sovereign Vexthera, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. Which of you speaks for the human species? Daeho stepped forward and bowed slightly, just enough to show respect without appearing weak. I am Commander Daeho Kim, representing the Terran Federation in these negotiations. We are honored by your presence, Sovereign. Vexthera's yellow eyes studied him intently. You are younger than I expected for such an important role. Are you certain your superiors trust you with matters of this importance? Age and wisdom don't always go together, Daeho replied smoothly. But I hope to prove worthy of the trust placed in me. The alien leader smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. We shall see, Commander Kim. We have much to discuss, and I have little patience for the usual diplomatic delays. As the formal introductions continued, Daeho began implementing the first layer of his plan. He allowed small signs of nervousness to show in his posture, made his responses slightly too quick, and let his eyes dart occasionally to his security chief. To the Velinary, it would appear that humanity was indeed intimidated and unprepared. But, in reality, every gesture was calculated. Every word was chosen carefully. The game had begun, and Daeho intended to win it through patience, psychology, perfect timing. The fate of humanity now rested on his ability to make the most powerful alien in the galaxy underestimate the species she thought she had already defeated. The main conference room of Confluence Station had been redesigned for the negotiations. A large oval table dominated the center, with human representatives on one side and Velinary delegates on the other. The lighting had been adjusted to accommodate both species, creating an atmosphere that felt neither fully human nor alien. Commander Daeho Kim sat across from Sovereign Vexthera, studying her every movement. The alien leader had removed her ceremonial armor and now wore what appeared to be formal, diplomatic robes. The dark fabric was decorated with silver threads that formed complex patterns, each one representing military victories from her past. Your station is smaller than I expected, Vexthera said as she examined the room. For a species that claims to control multiple star systems, your infrastructure seems quite limited. Ambassador Young-soo shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Confluence Station serves its purpose well, Sovereign. It has hosted many successful diplomatic meetings. Species of similar technological development, no doubt. The alien leader's yellow eyes moved to Daeho. Commander Kim, how many ships does your fleet currently operate? Daeho had prepared for this question. He allowed a brief pause before answering, as if the number embarrassed him. We maintain adequate defensive capabilities for our current needs. That was not an answer to my question. Approximately 200 active vessels, Daeho replied, making his voice sound reluctant. Though many are assigned to cargo and civilian transport duties, Vexthera smiled with satisfaction. 200 ships? My personal fleet contains 5 times that number, and the full Imperial Navy numbers in the tens of thousands. She leaned back in her chair. Yet you invited us here to negotiate as equals. Dr. Myung Choi watched the exchange from her position near the wall. As the team's xenopsychologist, she had been studying Velinary behavior for months, but seeing their leader in person provided new insights. The sovereign's body language showed confidence bordering on arrogance, but there were subtle signs of curiosity as well. General Wu Jinkong entered the room and took his seat beside Daeho. The military officer's face was stern and his uniform perfectly pressed. Sovereign, I hope you'll forgive my lateness. I was reviewing our border patrol reports. Border patrols. Vexthera's interest sharpened. You mean the small ships that have been monitoring our fleet movements? Standard defensive procedures, Wu Jin replied stiffly. We like to know when foreign vessels approach our territory. Foreign vessels. The alien leader repeated the words slowly. Commander Kim, does your general understand that this entire sector will soon belong to the Velinary Empire? Daeho raised his hand slightly to calm Wu Jin before he could respond. Sovereign, we came here to discuss peaceful coexistence, not territorial expansion. Surely there's room in the galaxy for both our species to prosper. Prosperity is earned through strength, Vexthera said firmly. The weak serve the strong. This is the natural order of things. Captain Hyjin Park entered the room carrying a data tablet. She approached Daeho's chair and whispered something in his ear. Her message was actually meaningless, but it was part of the performance they had rehearsed. Is there a problem, Captain? Daeho asked, allowing concern to creep into his voice. That can't wait, sir, Hyjin replied. It's routine security updates. Vexthera's attention focused on the exchange. Security concerns, Commander? Are you worried about the safety of your station? Any responsible leader takes precautions, Daeho answered. Though I'm sure our guests have only peaceful intentions, of course. The sovereign's smile was sharp. We are here for diplomacy. After all, Sub-Commander Thyrix, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. The Velinary officer's armor was less ornate than his leader's, but his bearing suggested considerable experience. Commander Kim, your diplomatic style is interesting. Most species either grovel for mercy or make grand threats they cannot fulfill. You seem to be doing neither. I prefer honesty to theatrics, Daeho replied. We both know the military situation. The question is whether we can find a solution that benefits everyone. Honesty. Thyrix looked amused. How refreshing. Tell me honestly then, what can humanity offer the Velinary Empire that we cannot take by force? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Youngsu started to speak, but Daeho gestured for him to remain quiet. This was a crucial moment in his psychological strategy. Innovation, Daeho said simply. Human creativity has always been our greatest strength. We solve problems in ways others don't expect. Give me an example, Vexthera demanded. Daeho activated a holographic display above the table. The image showed a human colony ship, but its design was unlike anything the Velinary had seen before. Instead of the typical metal hull, this ship appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and flowing lines. This is our newest colony vessel, Daeho explained. We develop bioengineering techniques that allow us to grow ship hulls using modified organisms. Result is stronger than metal, but uses half the resources to produce. Thyrix studied the image with obvious interest. Impressive, but such techniques would require years to implement on a large scale. True, Daeho agreed. But we have other innovations that could be adapted more quickly. Our medical advances, for instance, have eliminated most diseases that affect humanoid species. Vexthera waved her hand dismissively. The Velinary are warriors. We do not fear disease or death. Of course not, Daeho said respectfully. Even the greatest warriors appreciate techniques that heal battle wounds faster and restore fighting strength more quickly. For the first time, the sovereign looked genuinely interested. The Velinary culture valued martial prowess above all else, and anything that enhanced combat effectiveness would appeal to their leader. Dr. Myung made notes on her tablet. She was observing how the aliens responded to different types of information. The sovereign showed clear interest in military applications, but dismissed civilian benefits. Her pride in Velinary superiority was obvious, but she was also practical enough to recognize useful technology. "You speak of healing techniques, Vexthera?" said. "What proof do you offer of their effectiveness?" Deho had prepared for this question too. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a long scar on his forearm. This wound was inflicted during a training accident 3 days ago. With our medical techniques, what should have taken weeks to heal was restored in hours. The sovereign leaned forward to examine the scar more closely. Her yellow eyes showed the first hint of genuine surprise. Remarkable. Such healing speed would indeed benefit warriors in extended campaigns. "This is just one example," Deho continued. "We have dozens of innovations that could enhance Velinary military effectiveness. Food production techniques that work in harsh environments. Communication systems that function across vast distances. Navigation methods that work in unmapped space." General Wu Jin watched the exchange with growing understanding. He was beginning to see that Deho's strategy involved more than simple negotiation. The commander was carefully presenting humanity's strengths while downplaying their defensive capabilities. "These innovations interest me," Vexthera admitted, "but they do not change the fundamental power imbalance between our species. You have clever ideas, but we have the ships and weapons to take whatever we want." "True," Deho said, his voice becoming more submissive. "We cannot match your military might. That's why we hope to find a peaceful arrangement that benefits both our peoples." Sub-Commander Theorix exchanged a glance with his leader. The humans were showing exactly the kind of weakness the Velinary expected from inferior species. Yet their technology was genuinely impressive, and their leader seemed intelligent despite his obvious fear. "Commander Kim," Vexthera said slowly, "you speak of mutual benefit, but what you're really asking for is mercy. You want us to spare your species in exchange for your innovations?" Deho lowered his eyes slightly as if ashamed. "I suppose that's one way to put it, Sovereign. We're not proud, but we are practical. Better to serve and survive than to fight and die for nothing." The words hung in the air like a confession of defeat. Young Su looked shocked at such blunt admission of weakness, while General Wu Jin's jaw tightened with suppressed anger. Even Captain Haijin seemed disturbed by her commander's apparent capitulation, but Dr. Myung understood what was happening. Deho was feeding the Velinary exactly what their psychology expected to hear. He was confirming their beliefs about human weakness, while simultaneously demonstrating human value. Vexthera sat back in her chair with obvious satisfaction. Finally, honesty. "I respect your pragmatic approach, Commander. Perhaps we can indeed find an arrangement that serves both our interests." The Sovereign's tone had changed from threatening to almost friendly. She was beginning to see the humans not as dangerous enemies, but as useful subjects, who understood their place in the natural order. Deho allowed himself a small smile of relief, as if grateful for the Sovereign's merciful attitude. Inside, however, he was calculating his next move. The second layer of his psychological gambit was now in place, and the alien leader was reacting exactly as he had predicted she would. 3 days into the negotiations, Commander Deho Kim was reviewing reports in his private quarters when Captain Haijin Park burst through the door. Her face was pale and her hands shook as she held a communication device. "Commander, we have a problem," she said urgently. "The research vessel Harmony was destroyed 20 minutes ago. All hands lost." Deho set down his datapad and looked up calmly. "Destroyed by whom?" "Velinary patrol ship. They claim it was an accident. The Harmony allegedly strayed into restricted space during a scientific survey mission." Eugen's voice was tight with anger. "But our navigation logs showed the ship was well within human territory when it happened." "How many crew members were aboard?" 43 scientists and support staff. "Only one escape pod was recovered." She activated the communication device. "Engineer Borum Shin survived and is being brought to the station now." Deho stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the stars. His reflection showed a man deep in thought, but inside he was calculating rapidly. This incident was not unexpected. In fact, he had been waiting for something exactly like this to happen. "Captain, I want you to prepare the conference room for an emergency session," he said quietly. "Invite Sovereign Vexthera and her delegation." Make sure our entire negotiation team is present. Sir, are you planning to confront them about this attack? I'm planning to do exactly what they expect me to do. Deho turned back to face her. And Captain, when we meet with them, I want you to look angry. Very angry. Hyjin frowned in confusion. That won't be difficult, sir. I'm angry. Good. Let that anger show, but follow my lead no matter what I say or do. An hour later, the conference room was filled with tension. The human delegation sat on one side of the table, while the Velinary representatives faced them. Vexeta looked composed and confident. But Sub-Commander Thyrex seemed slightly uncomfortable. Deho entered the room with obvious fury on his face. His usually calm demeanor was replaced by barely controlled rage. He slammed a datapad down on the table, causing everyone to jump. 43 people are dead, he said, his voice shaking with emotion. 43 innocent scientists who were conducting peaceful research. Vexera remained unmoved. Commander Kim, accidents happen in space. It is unfortunate, but these things occur when vessels operate near military zones. Military zones? General Wu Zhenkong stood up angrily. That was human space, over 2 light years from your nearest patrol route. Space belongs to those strong enough to claim it, the sovereign replied coldly. Perhaps your scientists should have been more careful about their navigation? Dr. Myung Choi watched the exchange carefully. She could see that the Velinary leader was testing human reactions, pushing to see how far she could go before meeting real resistance. But she also noticed something else in the alien's behavior. A slight tension around her eyes that suggested this incident had not been entirely accidental. You're saying this was our fault? Ambassador Young-Soo asked in disbelief. That our people deserve to die because they were in the wrong place? I'm saying that weak species must learn to be more cautious around strong ones, Vexera answered. This is a lesson that could save lives in the future. Deho began pacing back and forth behind his chair. His movements were sharp and aggressive, completely unlike his usual controlled behavior. Lesson? You call murder a lesson? I call it education, the sovereign said with a cruel smile. Your people need to understand their place in the new order. Captain Hyjin could barely contain herself. Her hands were clenched into fists, and her jaw was tight with rage.
No.
New order? You mean your order, where you can kill anyone you want without consequences? Consequences? Thyrex spoke for her. The first time, his voice mocking. What consequences could you possibly impose on us? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The humans looked at each other helplessly, their military weakness suddenly feeling very real. Deho stopped pacing and stared at the alien officers, with what appeared to be desperate fury. We trusted you, he said, his voice breaking slightly. We came here in good faith, offering cooperation and friendship, and this is how you repay us? Trust is a luxury the weak cannot afford, Vexera replied. You should be grateful we're still willing to negotiate with you at all. At that moment, the conference room doors opened, and Engineer Borum Shin was escorted inside. The young woman was covered in medical bandages and walked with obvious pain. Her survival suit was torn and burned, and her eyes showed the trauma of losing her crewmates. Tell them what you saw, Deho said gently. His anger replaced by compassion for the survivor. Borum looked at the Velinary delegation with hatred. In her eyes, we were conducting a routine survey of an asteroid field. Nothing military, nothing threatening. Just scientific research. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. The Velinary ship appeared without warning and opened fire immediately. They didn't try to communicate or give us a chance to explain. We were in a restricted space, Thyrex said dismissively. We were in human territory, Borum shot back. I know because I was the navigation officer. I checked our position 3 times before we began the survey. Vexera studied the human engineer with cold eyes. Memory can be unreliable after traumatic events. Perhaps you are confused about your location? I'm not confused about watching my friends die, Borum replied, her voice shaking with emotion. The room fell silent. The weight of 43 lost lives pressed down on everyone present. The human delegation looked defeated and desperate. While the Velinary appeared unmoved by their suffering, Deho returned to his seat, his shoulders slumped as if the fight had gone out of him. What do you want from us? He asked quietly. Clearly you didn't come here just to negotiate trade agreements. Smart question, Vexera said approvingly. You're finally beginning to understand the situation. She leaned forward across the table. We want 3 things from humanity. First, complete access to your technological innovations. Second, mining rights to all resource-rich worlds in your territory. Third, the right to establish military bases wherever we choose. General Wu Jin started to object, but Deho raised his hand to stop him. And if we refuse, then what happened to the harmony will happen to every human ship and station, the sovereign said matter-of-factly. We will take what we want by force, and your species will cease to exist. The ultimatum was delivered without emotion, as if discussing the weather. Young-Su looked sick, while Heejin's face showed barely controlled rage. Even Dr. Mi-young seemed shaken by the casual threat of genocide. You're talking about the complete subjugation of humanity, Deho said slowly. I'm talking about the natural order of things, Vexthera corrected. The strong rule, the weak serve. You can accept this reality willingly and survive, or you can resist and be destroyed. Deho buried his face in his hands, appearing to struggle with the impossible choice. When he looked up again, his eyes showed defeat and desperation. How long do we have to decide? 24 hours, the sovereign replied. After that, we begin taking what we want by force. As the Velinary delegation filed out of the room, Therix paused at the door. Commander Kim, I almost respect your species' innovations. It's unfortunate that you lack the strength to keep them. After the aliens left, the human team sat in stunned silence. Commander, we have to contact Earth immediately. The fleet needs to know what we're facing. Fleet can't help us, General Wu Jin said bitterly. Even if we gathered every ship we have, we couldn't match their firepower. But Dr. Mi-young was watching Deho carefully. Something about his behavior during the confrontation had seemed off. His anger had been real, but there had been moments when it felt almost performed. She was beginning to suspect that their commander had expected this incident to happen. Commander, she said quietly, what's our next move? Deho looked around. The room at his team. His expression was grim, but there was something else in his eyes now. Something that looked almost like satisfaction. Our next move, he said slowly, is to give them exactly what they think they want. The emergency meeting of the human delegation took place in a secure conference room deep within Confluence Station. Commander Deho Kim sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his team. The weight of the Velinary ultimatum hung heavy in the air, but something about Deho's demeanor had changed since their confrontation with Sovereign Vexthera. 24 hours, Ambassador Young-Su repeated, his voice hollow. They want complete surrender in 24 hours, or they'll destroy us all. General Wu Jin slammed his fist on the table. This is madness. We should contact Earth immediately and prepare for war. At least we can die fighting instead of becoming slaves. Fighting with what? Captain Haijin asked bitterly. 200 ships against tens of thousands? It would be suicide. Dr. Mi-young watched Deho carefully. Throughout the heated discussion, he had remained unusually calm. His fingers were steepled in front of him. His eyes held a calculating look that seemed out of place, given their desperate situation. Commander, she said quietly, you've been very quiet.
Ow.
What are your thoughts? Deho looked around the table at each of his colleagues. These people had trusted him to lead humanity's diplomatic efforts, and now it seemed he had failed them. Completely, but appearances could be deceiving. I think, he said slowly, that we should give the sovereign exactly what she's asking for. The room erupted in shocked protests. Young-Su stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. You can't be serious. You're talking about surrendering our entire civilization. Am I? Deho asked calmly. Or am I talking about survival? There's no difference, Wu Jin said angrily. Surrender means the end of human independence. We become servants to an alien empire. Better servants than corpses, Deho replied. His words shocked everyone in the room. The man who had been chosen to represent humanity's interests was advocating complete capitulation. Colonel Yoon Jinam, who had been silent until now, stood up and faced Deho directly. Commander, I've served under you for 3 years. Seen you make difficult decisions, and stand firm against impossible odds. This isn't like you. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think, Deho said coldly. Maybe I'm just a pragmatist who knows when to accept reality. This isn't reality, Yunji shot back. This is cowardice. You're abandoning everything humanity stands for because you're afraid to fight. The accusation hung in the air like a physical blow. Hejin looked shocked. Youngsu appeared disgusted, and even Myung seemed disturbed by what she was hearing. Their leader, the man they had counted on to save their species, was revealing himself to be a coward. Colonel Nem, Deho said quietly, "You're relieved of duty. Captain Park, please escort the colonel to her quarters." "Sir, I don't think that's necessary," Haijin began. "I said escort her out," Deho repeated, his voice harder now. "Anyone else who can't accept the reality of our situation is free to join her." Yunji stared at him for a long moment, her face filled with disappointment and disgust. "I thought you were better than this, Commander. I thought you understood what it meant to be human." After she left, the room fell into uncomfortable silence. The remaining team members looked at their leader with new eyes, seeing weakness where they had once seen strength. "What's the plan?" Youngsu asked bitterly. "We just hand over our technology and our freedom and hope they treat us kindly. Give them what they want, and we survive," Deho replied. "It's not ideal, but it's better than extinction." "You're talking about the end of human civilization as we know it," Myung said softly. "Everything our species has achieved. Everything. We've dreamed of becoming. You're willing to throw it all away." "I'm willing to preserve what matters most," Deho answered. "Our people's lives." Meanwhile, in the Velinary delegation quarters, Sovereign Vexthera was meeting with her officers.
Deal.
The alien leader looked pleased with how the negotiations were progressing. "Humans are breaking faster than I expected," she told Subcommander Thyrix. "Their leader shows all the signs of a defeated commander. Fear, desperation, willingness to compromise principles for survival." "Perhaps we underestimated their weakness," Thyrix replied. "They speak of innovation and creativity, but when faced with real power, they collapse like all inferior species. The destruction of their research vessel was perfectly timed." Vexthera continued. "It showed them the cost of resistance, while giving them a face-saving excuse to surrender. Now they can tell themselves they're being practical rather than cowardly." Technician Jay Wuko was monitoring communications from his station in the Human Technical Center. As a computer specialist, he had access to most of the station's electronic systems. What he was seeing on his screens made his blood run cold. Velinary were not just negotiating. They were actively scanning the station's databases, copying technical specifications, and downloading classified files. Worse, their scans were detecting human fleet positions and defensive capabilities throughout. Known space? He tried to contact Deho directly, but was told the commander was in meetings and couldn't be disturbed. Frustrated and worried, Jawook began implementing security protocols to limit what the aliens could access. Back in the conference room, Ho was outlining his plan for surrender. "We'll transfer our medical and engineering databases to them. First, that will buy us some goodwill and show we're serious about cooperation. And then what?" Haijin asked. "We become a client species. Our children grow up as subjects of an alien empire." "Our children grow up alive," Deho replied firmly. "That's what matters." Youngsu stood up and began pacing. "Commander, I've known you for 5 years. You've never backed down from a fight when principles were at stake. Something about this doesn't feel right." Deho's expression hardened. "What doesn't feel right is watching our people die for nothing. The Harmony crew learned what happens to humans who resist Velinary power. Do you want to see that happen on a planetary scale?" The mention of the destroyed research vessel silenced further objections. The image of 43 dead scientists was fresh in everyone's minds, a stark reminder of what they were facing. But Myung was still studying Deho's behavior. Something about his body language didn't match his words. His posture suggested confidence rather than defeat, and his eyes held a sharpness that seemed inconsistent with surrender. "Commander," she said carefully, "have you considered that there might be other options? Ways to resist that don't involve direct military confrontation? Such as guerrilla tactics, underground resistance, making occupation more costly than cooperation?" Deho shook his head. Doctor, you're thinking like a human. The Velinari don't negotiate with rebels. They eliminate them. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of our species. As the meeting continued, Deho's apparent capitulation became more complete. He spoke of humanity's future as servants of the Velinari Empire, of the need to accept their new place in the Galactic Order, the practical benefits of surrendering without a fight. But hidden behind his words was a deeper truth. Every detail of the alien delegation's behavior was being cataloged and analyzed. Every casual comment about Velinari military doctrine was being recorded. Every moment of overconfidence was being stored away for future use. The sovereign believed she was negotiating with a defeated enemy. In reality, she was being studied by a predator who was still very much in the hunt. The fourth layer of Deho's Gambit was now in motion. Soon the aliens would learn that human weakness could be the most dangerous deception of all. The final negotiation session was scheduled for the main conference hall of Confluence Station. Commander Deho Kim arrived early, carrying a data storage device that supposedly contained humanity's most advanced technologies. His face showed the weariness of a defeated leader preparing to surrender his entire species. Sovereign Vexthera entered with her full delegation, their confidence evident in every step. The alien leader wore ceremonial robes that marked this. As a moment of historic triumph, to her, this was the day the Velinari Empire gained a new servant species and valuable technologies. Commander Kim, she said with satisfaction, I trust you have prepared the technological transfers we discussed. Deho held up the storage device. Everything you requested is here. Medical advances, engineering innovations, navigation systems, and manufacturing techniques. His voice carried the hollow tone of a man who had given up hope. Excellent. Vexthera took her seat at the head of the table. Your government has agreed to our territorial demands. All 3 colony worlds will be evacuated within 6 months, Deho replied. The populations will be relocated to designated human settlements under Velinari oversight. Ambassador Young Su sat beside Deho looking sick with shame. General Wu Jin stared at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The entire human delegation appeared broken by the weight of their surrender. You have made the wise choice, the sovereign said approvingly. Your species will survive and perhaps even prosper under our guidance. History will remember this as the day humanity accepted its proper place in the Galactic Order. Dr. Myung watched the proceedings with growing unease. Something about Deho's behavior continued to bother her. Despite his apparent defeat, there were subtle signs that didn't match his words. The way he held his shoulders, the occasional glint in his eyes, the careful precision of his language. Before we finalize these agreements, Deho said slowly, I have one question for you, Sovereign. Ask it. Why'd you come here personally? What empire could have sent any number of subordinates to accept our surrender? What made this negotiation important enough to require your direct attention? Vexthera smiled with predatory satisfaction. Because I wanted to see the moment when humanity realized its weakness. I wanted to watch your leaders understand that. All your innovations and creativity mean nothing without the strength to defend them. I see. Deho nodded thoughtfully. And now that you've seen it, are you satisfied? Very much so. Your species showed exactly the reaction we expected. Fear, desperation, and ultimately, practical surrender. At that moment, Captain Hudgin Park entered the conference hall. Instead of her usual security uniform, she wore the formal dress uniform of the Terran Federation Navy. Her bearing was straight and confident, completely unlike the defeated officer she had appeared to be for the past week. Commander, she said formally, Admiral Donghayan Lim sends his regards. The fleet is in position and awaiting your orders. The words hit the Velinari delegation like a physical blow. Subcommander Theric stood up quickly, his hand moving toward his weapon. What fleet? Our scans showed no significant human military presence in this sector. Deho smiled for the first time since the negotiations began. It was not the smile of a defeated man, but the expression of someone who had just sprung a carefully planned trap. The fleet you couldn't detect because they were exactly where I wanted them to be, he said calmly. His entire demeanor had changed. The weariness was gone. replaced by sharp intelligence and quiet confidence. Vexthera's yellow eyes narrowed dangerously. "What are you talking about, human?" "I'm talking about the fact that every word you've spoken, every casual comment about Velinary military doctrine, every detail about your fleet positions and strategic thinking has been recorded and analyzed." Deho stood up and activated a holographic display. "I'm talking about the most complete intelligence profile of Velinary capabilities ever compiled by human forces." The display showed detailed schematics of Velinary ship designs, tactical formations, and communication protocols. Information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain was laid out in perfect detail. "Impossible," Thyrex breathed. "This intelligence is classified at the highest levels." "You gave it to us," Deho replied simply. "Every time you boasted about your military superiority, every casual reference to fleet positions, every detail you shared to demonstrate your power over us. We recorded it all." Dr. Miyung suddenly understood what she had been seeing, the psychological profile. "You were never planning to surrender. You were studying them." "Studying and manipulating," Deho confirmed. "Everything you saw was performance. The fear, the desperation, the willingness to capitulate. All of it was designed to make you feel so superior that you would reveal information you never intended to share." Vexthera's face showed a mixture of rage and grudging respect. "You deceived us." "I gave you exactly what your psychology demanded to see," Deho corrected. "Your culture values strength and despises weakness. You needed to believe we were weak in order to feel secure enough to reveal your true capabilities." "Commander Sujin." Ru's voice came through the communication system. "Commander Kim, this is Captain Ru of the Terran Dreadnought Indomitable. We have the Velinary flagship surrounded and targeted, waiting your orders." The alien delegation looked around in confusion and growing alarm. Through the conference hall's viewports, they could see human warships materializing from stealth positions. Ships that had been hidden using advanced technology the Velinary had never encountered. "How?" Vexthera demanded. "Our sensors detected nothing." "Because you were looking for the kind of ships you expected us to have," Deho explained. "We've developed stealth technology that renders our vessels invisible to traditional scanning methods. While you were analyzing our apparent weaknesses, we were positioning our strengths exactly where we needed them." Technician Jay Wuko entered the conference hall carrying a data tablet. "Commander, we've successfully uploaded a monitoring virus into their ship's computer systems. We now have complete access to their navigation and communication networks." Youngsu stared at Deho in amazement.
Ow.
"Every detail," Deho confirmed. "From the moment they arrived early to demonstrate their power, I knew exactly how their psychology would drive their behavior. Warriors who pride themselves on strength cannot resist demonstrating that strength to those they consider weak." The research vessel Myong said suddenly. "The Harmony. You knew they would destroy it." Deho's expression became more serious. "I knew they would provoke an incident to test our reactions. I couldn't know exactly what form it would take, but I prepared for the possibility." The Harmony's crew was evacuated before the attack. The ship was operated by remote control. But engineer Boram Shin, Haijin protested. "She was injured, traumatized." "She's an actress," Deho revealed. "A very talented one who volunteered. For this mission, her injuries are makeup and her trauma was performance. Though I must say her acting convinced even me at times." The revelation hit the room like a thunderclap. Everything they had believed about the negotiations was false. The destroyed ship, the desperate surrender, the defeat of human hope. All of it had been an elaborate deception designed to manipulate alien psychology. Sovereign Vexthera slowly sat back down, her mind racing as she tried to understand the full scope of what had happened. "You used our own nature against us. I used your assumptions against you," Deho corrected. "You assumed that because we appeared weak, we actually were weak. You assumed that because we seemed desperate, we had no alternatives. You assumed that because we offered to surrender, we had already been defeated. And now," Thyrex asked quietly. "Now we negotiate as equals," Deho said firmly. "Your fleet is surrounded and outgunned. Your ship's computers are compromised. Your military secrets are in our possession. The balance of power has shifted completely. But instead of pressing his advantage, Deho did something that surprised everyone in the room. He sat back down and gestured for the Velinary delegation to remain seated. However, he continued, I'm not interested in conquest or revenge. I'm interested in something much more valuable than victory. The conference hall fell into stunned silence as the full weight of the situation settled over both delegations. Sovereign Vexthera sat rigid in her chair, her yellow eyes fixed on Commander Deho Kim with a mixture of respect and barely controlled fury. The tables had turned completely, but the human leader's next words would determine whether this ended in bloodshed or something entirely different. Sovereign, Deho said calmly, you and I both know that military victory is only the beginning of any lasting solution. I could destroy your fleet, capture your ships, and send you back to your empire in shame. But what would that accomplish? Psst. Vexthera's voice was tight with controlled anger. It would demonstrate that humans are not the weak species we believe them to be. True, but it would also create a blood feud between our peoples that could last for generations. Deho leaned forward across the table. Your empire has thousands of ships. Even if we defeated your fleet today, they would send others. The cycle of violence would continue until one of our species was extinct. Sub-Commander Thyrex watched the exchange with growing understanding. Despite being outmaneuvered, his leader had not been captured or humiliated. The human commander was offering her something that warrior cultures valued almost as much as victory, the chance to preserve honor. What are you proposing? Vexthera asked carefully. Partnership, Deho replied simply. Genuine alliance. Between equals, based on mutual respect and shared benefits. The word seemed to surprise everyone in the room. Ambassador Young Su looked confused. General Wu Jin appeared skeptical. Even Captain Haijin seemed uncertain about this direction. You have us at a disadvantage, the sovereign said slowly. How would you offer partnership instead of demanding surrender? Because I understand something about the Velinary that you don't realize we know, Deho explained. Your empire isn't expanding because of greed or conquest. You're expanding because your homeworlds are running out of resources. The statement hit the alien delegation like a physical blow. Thyrex instinctively moved toward his weapon, while other Velinary officers exchanged alarmed glances. This was classified information known only to the highest levels of their government. Dr. Myung's analysis of your behavior patterns revealed stress indicators that suggested resource pressure. Deho continued. Your aggressive expansion isn't about building an empire. It's about survival. Vexthera's composure finally cracked slightly. How could you possibly know about our resource situation? The same way we knew about your fleet positions and military? Doctrine, Deho replied. We listened to what you told us and analyzed what it really meant. When you spoke of taking human colony worlds, you mentioned mining rights first and territory second. When you described your military needs, you emphasized supply lines over conquest routes. Dr. Myung activated her data tablet and displayed a complex analysis chart. Commander Kim asked me to study not just your negotiation tactics, but the underlying motivations driving your expansion. Pattern was clear once we knew what to look for. Your people are starving, Deho said, with surprising gentleness. Not literally, but your industrial base is consuming resources faster than your planets can replenish them. You need new sources of raw materials, energy, and agricultural products. The truth hung in the air like a revelation. The mighty Velinary Empire, with its massive fleets and warrior culture, was facing the same challenge that had driven human expansion into space, the need for resources to sustain their growing population. And you think humans can help with this? Vexthera asked. I know we can, Deho replied confidently. Remember the bioengineering technology I showed you? We can grow ship hulls using modified organisms, but we can also grow food in environments where nothing should be able to survive. We can create synthetic materials that replace rare minerals. We can develop energy systems that work in ways your scientists haven't considered. Thyrex leaned forward with genuine interest. You're talking about resource creation, not just resource extraction? Exactly. Deho activated another holographic display showing various human innovations. We don't just find resources, we make them. And we can teach these techniques to your people. In exchange for what? Vexthera asked suspiciously. Protection and partnership, Deho replied. Your military technology is superior to ours? Your ships are faster, your weapons more powerful, your tactical knowledge more advanced. We need that protection as we expand into unknown regions of space. The proposal was elegant in its simplicity. Humans would provide resource technologies that could solve the Velinary crisis, while the aliens would provide military protection that could secure humanity's future expansion. Both species would benefit from the arrangement without either being subordinated to the other. You're suggesting a mutual defense pact, Young-Su said, finally understanding the scope of Deho's strategy. More than that, Deho corrected. I'm suggesting a true alliance. Shared research projects, joint exploration missions, combined military operations against common threats, not master and servant, but partners working toward common goals. Commander? Sujin-Ru's voice came through the communication system again. Commander Kim, the Velinary flagship, is powering down its weapon systems. They're signaling for direct communication. Vexthera looked at Deho with something approaching admiration. You orchestrated all of this? The deception, the revelation, even this offer of partnership was all planned from the beginning. The deception and revelation were planned, Deho admitted. But the partnership offer is genuine. I needed to demonstrate that humans were worthy of respect before I could propose true cooperation. And if we refuse, then you return to your empire with the knowledge that humanity is stronger than you believed, and we continue our separate paths through the galaxy. But we'll both be weaker for it. The Sovereign stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the mixed fleet of human and Velinary ships. The sight was unprecedented. Two species that had been on the brink of war, now positioned as potential allies. My culture values strength above all else, she said slowly. But true strength sometimes means recognizing when cooperation serves better than conflict. Wisdom is its own form of strength, Deho replied. Vexthera turned back to face the room. Commander Kim, your deception was masterful, and your offer is intriguing. But how do I explain this to my empire? How do I tell them that we were outmaneuvered by a species we considered inferior? You don't, Deho said simply. You tell them that you discovered a species worthy of alliance, that you found partners who can solve the resource crisis and help secure Velinary expansion into new territories. It would allow us to save face. I would help you frame the truth in a way that serves both our peoples, Deho corrected. The Velinary discovered human potential and chose partnership over conquest. That's not weakness. It's strategic intelligence. Admiral Donghayan Lim's voice joined the communication.
All ships report ready status.
The combined fleet is prepared for joint operations whenever you give the word, Commander. The phrase combined fleet was not lost on anyone in the room. Somehow, during the negotiations, the human and Velinary forces had begun working together. The psychological transformation was already beginning. 6 months later, Commander Deho Kim stood on the bridge of the first joint human-Velinary exploration vessel. The ship incorporated the best technologies from both species. Human innovation merged with Velinary engineering to create something neither could have built alone. Sovereign Vexthera approached from the tactical station, where she had been reviewing star charts with Captain Hyjin Park. The unlikely friendship between the alien leader and the human security officer had become a symbol of the new alliance. The resource surveys from the Kepler system are complete, Vexthera reported. Bioengineering techniques have identified 17 different ways to extract materials from previously useless asteroids. And your tactical analysis has identified 3 potential threats that we would never have detected, Deho replied. The partnership is working exactly as planned. Dr. Myung looked up from her xenopsychology research station. I'm still amazed by how well the cultural integration is proceeding. Both species are learning from each other faster than I predicted. Perhaps, Vexthera said thoughtfully, the greatest strength is not the ability to defeat your enemies, but the wisdom to turn them into allies. Deho smiled as he looked out at the stars ahead. The galaxy is vast enough for many different kinds of strength. Our job is to find them all and help them work together. The exploration vessel continued its journey into uncharted space, carrying representatives of two species that had learned the most important lesson of all, that true victory sometimes meant helping your opponent win as well. Behind them, the alliance between humans and Velinari grew stronger with each passing day. Trade routes flourished, joint research projects solved problems neither species could have tackled alone, and combined military forces provided security for expansion into dangerous regions of space. And somewhere in the depths of space, alien civilizations detected the signals of this new alliance and began to wonder what other surprises humanity might have in store for the galaxy.